we will start the Finance Committee meeting of October 2022. Present are myself, Mark Weber, Jonathan Smith, Tim McCarthy, Bridget Cabot, Steve Bronder. Nice to have you back with us, Steve.
Thank you.
Yes. Kayla Trago, Amber Rathburn, Director, and Kate Sandretto. Wow, yeah, wow. And it's nice to see people out here for a change. Wow. We don't usually get an audience, but so there's the roll call. I did it myself. And are there any citizens' concerns? No, we have citizens out here. Okay. All right. The approval of the minutes of 9/13/2022. Any objections?
They look fine.
All right. We'll go on.
No objections.
No objections? Okay. I'm making a little change in the agenda. I have fellow councilman Kevin Fuller here, and Kevin's been doing a little research on our language for bidding projects, and I asked him to come and just speak to this committee and give us some information, since if there is a code change that's going to be made, it actually falls under the Department of Finance. And go ahead, Kevin. Now this will probably go into a lot more detail in the Service Committee or Public Utilities Committee, but just for this committee, he just wants to let us know what he's found.
I know I sent, I do have copies if anyone needs one. All right. So I just really kind of just briefly want to explain like how we got, basically I'm here before you. So like Mark said, I have been doing a little research on our bidding practices, and always looking for a way that we can do things a little better, right? So I've invested quite a bit of time in kind of looking into examining the way we've done things. I know we've talked about this quite a while in the Service Committee. Then I kind of made mention over the past several months of begin to look into this particular process of how we accept and handle bids. So kind of in an effort to be part of that solution, I began doing research on this. What you see before you, I put together, I'm sure you can tell I spent quite a bit of time on it. So, and really just kind of coming over across like several items. When I originally approached this with the Service Committee, if you look around the state of Ohio, you find a significant amount of, I would say, similar language that addresses bidding that further establishes bidding practices in the Ohio Revised Code. So it will further establish minimum requirements and things like that, further defines those things. And while I was searching, I found quite a bit of information. Kind of was overwhelming, and even the three that I thought I had it narrowed down to, I don't think we had a very good starting point. So I kind of went back to the drawing board on our end and tried to just put something together that was a little bit more straightforward, perhaps a template again to be able to work for. So, or work from. I did understand at that time that it sounded like we needed language was objective one, and that two, we needed to find a place in the code for it. The first objective I felt was met, and then while going through it, I found that under section 252, and you'll see that reflected in 252.052, that's the proposal section would be in the amendment to that particular ordinance. And while that directly affected the Finance Department, I felt warranted to reach out to Chairman Weber, and again, he asked me to speak here before you today. So it wasn't my intention to, again, pull this from service. That's not my intention. I know I did talk to Jan. I did write her an email this afternoon expressing those sentiments as well, and she's well aware of that. I did speak here this afternoon. So just here it is before you, and that was what I was hoping to achieve tonight. So.
Does anyone have any questions for him?
Just two quick ones. Kevin, the threshold you use here is 25,000. Well, how's prevailing wage? Is that at 50 or 100?
I think Bridget sent over some information on that. I think
There's two different thresholds. One is for new construction versus reconstruction and renovation. I think the reconstruction and renovation is somewhere in the neighborhood of 75,000, and I think new construction might be 125,000.
Oh, goodness.
So I guess I kind of picked a number basically, and 25,000 was in the language in that code section. That's kind of why I stuck with that.
Yeah. I just, and did I see, I thought, but I looked at your email again today, I thought I remembered hearing that other jurisdictions had adopted something like this, but am I right or wrong? Am I remembering that correctly or incorrectly?
Yeah, so there's other, I know the original three that I presented to the service committee, and again, those were things that we kind of narrowed down. One of them was the city of Mansfield, Ohio. There was Toledo, and that looked like it was pretty broad, and like, I don't know, I'm trying to slam their language, but I felt like we probably could have done a little bit better. And then I think Metro Parks, those are the ones that I sent out originally. And yeah, there's other similar language throughout the state too that I just felt this here, where what I got to is a culmination of all those things together. So.
And didn't you mention Bowling Green was considering adopting?
I believe there are two other municipalities. I think one is Rossford. I think Bowling Green might be another. They're potentially addressing this too. To, as you know, in the construction industry, help is in high demand, and with that kind of comes some other things that they're trying to address and nip these things in the bud before it becomes a city problem. So.
And like I said, with help in such high demand, a lot of contractors could possibly sub contractors that are not as qualified as we thought that contractor was when they got the job. Is that correct?
Yeah, so some of these things.
Subs under subs.
Yeah, and this is focused on responsible and responsive bidders. So it really does, it takes an ORC and helps to, we're further defining what those, at least that's the intent behind it, is that we're further defining that. And some of those it covers past business practices, you know, do they have any tax liens? It's a lot of information that we'd be asking up front, so that when we receive that information, we can make that determination and we don't end up kind of under the gun, or, you know, later on down the road, we're able to make that determination through responsibility up front.
So I do have a couple of questions here myself. I know in section A3 it says the bidder participates in, sponsors, or exclusively hires graduates of a construction apprentice program certified and regulated by the state of Ohio or the U.S. Department of Labor. I have some concerns on that aspect of it about pigeonholing too much into, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't know all the ins and outs, so this is why I'll ask the question. Is this exclusively only written in there that would hire union employees, or is this something that still be kept broad open to where it's not going to just limit it to one particular business or a small amount of businesses?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know, and I know, given my background, right, I know the industry well. I do know the non-union, union alike. And while that language is not in here, that's not the intention behind it. They do have those training programs that are accredited through the state and or the U.S. Department of Labor. So there's quite a few out there. I know I can just speak for my knowledge, but it is both union and non-union. That's the intent behind it.
Can you give some examples of, because I'm not familiar enough to know what would be considered a non-union apprentice program. Is that like PENDA or is it?
I would say like the ABC, Association of Building Contractors. They're a very large organization that provide private training to their members. And then this is really nothing outside of kind of what's built in some of the Ohio language too, regarding on-the-job training, journey person requirements, and things like that. And I guess my intent is, while I would say I'm very passionate about what I do, I look at some of the, you know, like our vocational schools, some of the graduates, right, and you've seen that kind of flying around that, you know, the kids that aren't going to college, right, this is you know, they're further training after graduation. When they get into apprenticeship or any particular type of training, that's their higher education. You look at somebody who graduates PENA, Perrysburg graduates, things like that, they'll want to get into that. I think it'd be no different though. Kate may smack me for I kind of played a lawyer role here, but I'm not obviously a lawyer, but you know, I think I think it's along those lines. You wouldn't want a doctor out there performing surgery that hadn't, done, haven't gone to med school. So I feel like it's kind of in that regard the same thing. And I think in many of those types of trainings you get, you're going to get safety. You're going to get your experience of just even the basics on how to operate hand tools and stuff like that. So whether somebody's on the ground picking up tools and material or garbage, they're also then able to have an understanding of the job sites around them, the safety and things like that. So that's kind of why I put that in there. It is out there. I think it encourages best practices in the industry. And really that's why I put it in there. So to answer your question shortly, is no.
Is Penn is not really considered an apprentice program at that point, or is that something that would have to be done after you graduate from Penn, if I understand correctly?
That's the way that it is, although I would have to kind of look into that a little bit further, because I feel like there's some opportunities there. I think there's some school to work things that they can do in their senior year. So it would actually probably even apply to them as well. So while they're going to school, we could also be putting them to work. So.
And then another concern I have is in 8.1 it says the bidder provides healthcare benefits. I know that per the federal guideline, the ACA, is it 50 employees and less doesn't need to require healthcare benefits. So I'm concerned that we are adding an additional hindrance on top of what the federal government has if we were to keep that in there. I understand the intent, and I don't disagree with the intent of ensuring that we're not that we're getting people that are being paid a fair wage on this. I'm just concerned if we're going too far with some of that language over top of what the federal government already requires.
Okay. Is it? And I'm not very familiar with that particular language, and might have to look into that one. But I guess I know some of the concern too, the potential for providing health insurance as well, where people may not want it. I guess the only recommendation I may have on that is, we have like a cash equivalent. Maybe we reword that or something like that. But I'm trying to figure out how would you equate that. Do you have any reference to that?
I don't.
Is it federal code? You said?
I want to say it's part of the Affordable Care Act that it stated, and I don't know if anyone up here is familiar with that at all. But I don't believe that businesses with 50 employees or less are required to have health insurance.
I believe that is a correct statement, that the Affordable Care Act requires the businesses with more than 50 employees provide health insurance, but 50 employees or less do not have to provide health insurance. So their local mom and pop shops kind of thing wouldn't necessarily have health insurance.
So I'm concerned that, with 25,000, there's definitely some smaller contractors here that may fit some of the other criteria, but may not be required to. That this could end up making it more cost prohibitive for them to even bid with the city because of something like that. If they're required to have healthcare benefits, because it's not just a one-time thing for a project.
Yeah.
They have to have that in on a long-term basis, and for some that can mean the difference of staying afloat or going under. And I don't want to see that happen. And go on that. And then regarding retirement benefits, the only thing that I'm just kind of curious if we can look at, again, when we put some of these in there, if it's not something that's already being offered by some of these businesses, we could end up seeing higher bidding cost by having some of those requirements in. But if we are looking to, if this does pass, I would like to see at least something on there that shows that in lieu of providing retirement benefits, maybe it's an extra 3% increase on what is considered what's the term I'm looking for? What's the wage that? Prevailing wage, thank you. So an additional on top of that in lieu of, that could be included, but.
That allows some flexibility and still.
I just still have some hesitations though, just because I'm concerned that this might pigeonhole some of the smaller businesses. I know I've mentioned it before, but I kind of think of some of our contractor clients that I know that it's a family business. The retirement is the business, or they don't have the health care because it's not something that they really thought of investing in for themselves, or they purchased it privately because the cost is better for them.
Yeah.
And thinking of 5 or 6 different employees. I know several that are like that may put a bid on something like this, but they don't necessarily. They may have retirement plans, they don't have health care because it's family ran, and they just made the decision not to do it that way, or they purchase it privately versus doing it through the business. And I don't want to see them excluded.
Yeah, I understand that. I would say too, I guess something that comes to mind is where, I guess it would be something that, where does the city deem those? I find it hard to not offer health insurance or care or, pension or retirement type benefits to somebody doing work on city projects, since we typically offer, that's, I guess, one of my reluctancies, and maybe it needs to be reworded, I don't know, but we do offer, healthcare to our city employees, right? Or they're provided in some fashion, also some sort of savings, retirement options, right? So I guess I find it, I'm a little uncomfortable with not providing that to somebody, as they would be an extension of the city at that point in time. They would be working for the city. Maybe in not a typical sense, but they are doing work for the city. I would say too, I just know from past experience, I've seen structures and types of business models where people do tend to, like, construction manager project, and they will they'll 1099 and then 1099 and 1099 people. And while everyone in this room, I'm sure, pays into Social Security, I'm sure they pay into workers' compensation and all those other important things, they wouldn't expect me to be up here advocating against. There are business models out there, and one that I may or may not know that has done work for the city. So I think it's important that when we engage in those particular projects, and we are spending taxpayer dollars, that we're encouraging good behavior and legal behavior for that matter. So those items I know are things that kind of come with that, and maybe there's another way to address that through language as well. But again, those are, I guess, some of my initial intentions behind it. So.
And I respect that intention, and I think that that's something we need to look at as well, because I know exactly what issues you're referencing with that. I'm not sure exactly how to word that myself.
Yeah.
I just know that with several different contractors I know that are smaller, but they do treat their employees well, they pay them well. They may have the retirement, but they may not have health, or vice versa, depending on if it's a family business. 25,000, that can go into, with the way this construction market is right now, 25,000 can happen pretty quick. And I don't want to see us excluding some people that may fit the qualifications that we're looking for, just because of the type of business they are. And not saying that it's a 1099, 1099, but the family's small.
Family owned.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Perhaps we could look at increasing that threshold then from 25 up to matching what we have now for remodeling and new construction at 75 and 125.
At that level, you wouldn't need it.
Yeah.
Because the House prevailing wage statute would kick in.
Would having an internal prevailing wage statute might make at a 25 threshold may make a difference versus having a 10?
Well, I think that's kind of what this is.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Kevin is proposing is sort of if you want, that probably isn't a bad way to refer to it, an internal prevailing wage ordinance.
No, with this, and I know you're the labor attorney, so that's why I'm looking at you on this. Is this model similar to how the state has a prevailing wage language? Or? Okay.
I'd have to look. I don't get into the prevailing wage statutes all that much.
Okay.
I assume it is because I'm generally familiar with them, and this sounds very much like what they focus on. Participation in the apprenticeship program, healthcare and retirement. I mean, that's the usual stuff.
No. My only concern is with a set limit on there of 25,000. That's something that future council may have to look at, revisit. 20 years from now, $25,000 is $10,000 to what we are today.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's kind of no different than anything else we have in the code too, and similar language is 25,000. I mean, you may look at that as a significant amount for allowable expenditures, but
what I almost wonder if we look at with that is to have that reference and maybe this isn't even a good idea, but 25,000 for the threshold to come to council, just to have the projects that exceed, section, whatever that section code is. I don't know that off the top of my head. I was trying to look it up as I was sitting here, and my fingers aren't typing as fast as I want. But even had to reference something that you only have to change once versus having to change, 20 different spots within our code if there is a change.
And I will say too, I know some of this language, you mentioned prevailing wage, some of this language that's in here as well, at least just given the research I was doing, it is actually more in depth than prevailing wage. So just the initial, because there's some things here too, I think, as far as like, how would we enforce some of these things? Just trying to find a reference point here. But I mean, just as far as like going back and validating, while they may be bonded, right, they may not have had to provide information on potential tax liens and or legal judgments, things like that. That's not asked in prevailing wage. That's kind of what this is asking for, is that we're getting some of those things initially up front. And even within the realms of prevailing wage, I don't believe they had that. And then I think also too is kind of like the follow up on that is, how are we doing that? If we are, so, and I don't know, I'd have to check the prevailing wage rates here, or prevailing wage language here in Ohio. I'm not sure right off the bat, just trying to look that up.
I don't think I have too much of an issue with some of those other items that you were mentioning on there. It's just more in regards to that section A that I've kind of narrowed in on.
Section A. Yeah, I think the other thing is too, is I think one of the important things I kind of looked in when I was kind of going through art, and I was just looking at my notes here, was who's doing like this, there's, in our language, at least bridge of the document that's sent over to the service committee, there was a reference to local funds, to bid document page. You probably don't have that in front of you, but it makes reference to city contractor registration, and I know what this also has in that is language regarding subcontractors. So in a case where a general contractor may kind of fit the bill, and that's often, like I mentioned earlier, under those tax models, or I would consider a legitimate business model, where they do 1099, they 1099, and just kind of pass the buck. Those would be, a lot of times I'll refer to those as subcontractors. And that's, when you would take somebody that's potentially getting a day rate, like, imagine the worst case scenario. I'm going to speak because I know the industry. Imagine somebody that would get up and you might have seen documentaries and things like that, but someone that would be waiting outside of the Home Depot for a job for that day, paying a day rate. Or in a scenario where someone would be, the IRS is very specific on the way that employees should be paid, if they're hourly and or salary, or if you're a private contractor. So you wouldn't necessarily take an hourly employee and treat them as a subcontractor when they're using, say, tools of the company, when they're driving a company truck, when they're getting paid hourly. You wouldn't 1099 that person. The subcontractor is someone that would give you an estimate on a project, and they would pay you for a set amount of work that was done. So within that business model too, I'd say this language, I feel like addresses that as well. Some of the subcontractor language, where I don't believe current prevailing wage does address that.
Okay, well then we'll definitely be just discussing this further in service and probably your committee as well.
Okay.
And thanks for the information for this committee. We'll be talking a lot more about it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I'm going to go down to item number 9. This is something that we carried over from last month that we started a discussion about. We had asked about the fees that the city charges, and it was explained to us, and Bridget was going to have some information for us. We're just now seeing this for the first time.
So yes, this committee has several questions. I had several questions about information. So what I tried to do is organize this one sheet into a couple different categories. The first top half of this sheet is a small spreadsheet indicating neighbors that I contacted regarding their practices for charging for city services, city equipment to events that are non-city events. And you'll see a variety of yes, nos. There's some asterisks with some special notations alongside the bottom of that chart. And then those spaces that are blank because either there was not a definite yes or no answer, it may not apply in certain instances because they don't have the types of events that they would charge for personnel that is non-law enforcement based on the activities that their city sees. Oregon is one, for instance. Most of the events that take place in that city are city-sponsored events, so they are obviously not charging themselves for their own services, but rather in the one instance where many of us have probably participated is the German American Festival, and they do charge their officers overtime to that event, to the GAF, and they reimburse the city for their fees. So you can take a look at a variety of scenarios that play out. One thing that was a common theme amongst talking to all these individuals is that it seems like the frequency of events in all the jurisdictions is becoming increasingly larger and larger, and they're finding it somewhat burdensome on the city personnel, depending on if they have collective bargaining agreements or not, because they're finding that folks that do projecting, they're having a difficult time getting any officers to want to project. And if they don't have projecting rates, but rather an overtime rate, there are people who are at the low end of the overtime list that are constantly getting forced in. For instance, in the one event that takes place multiple weeks out of the year here in the city, we have public service employees who are on a routine basis are forced over every single Thursday for weeks on end for 3-hour stints at that event. And it's becoming tiresome, and the employees are not very happy about that. And then I took the middle section of this document, and the question was raised about how our overtime rates are calculated. You'll see how the police officers are calculated by Chief Jones, and then down below that, you'll see how the public service director is calculating that overtime rate. And then at the bottom half, it was asked if we could provide a list of events that are charged for either police or service activities. And we broke that down by police and service. You'll see in each event what they were charged this year. And I think that was the information that was asked for. We can certainly dive deeper into any questions that you have.
Just to expand on that, then I just more specifically the farmers market, I asked Christine to come and speak just to give us some information on the numbers that she's seeing, the cost of them. And it's, once again, it's for informational purposes for us, and we just, like they said in Dragnet, just facts, ma'am.
I was just going to say that, just the facts. Thank you, Chairman Weber. My name is Christine Best, and I am the Executive Director of Visit Perrysburg, as you all know, as Perrysburg CVB. We are very proud and happy, and we value the relationship we have with the city, and we understand these expenses come because we become so successful. That's a great problem to have. We understand that those expenses have to be incurred by someone, and we also know that when you have a successful event like we do on Thursdays for Farmers Market, thousands and thousands of people come, and they come with their trash. So we understand that we need to pick up our part of the tab on that. It was not part of something we were prepared for this year. However, we made some adjustments in our budget, and I've spoken with Bridget about this several times. We know we have to pay what we have to. So I've come today to talk about the actual allocation study that we did to start the 2023 budget. I dove deep into what the actual cost to the CVB was for the farmers market this year for the 24 weeks that we have. Thursday is the last one. If no one knows, please come. It's going to be a Halloween themed. It's going to be a lot of fun. But with the 24 weeks that we have on the books, the salary and hours required by the staff of the CVB to put on the event, the marketing, the supplies, the signage, and these additional city charges that were going to be incurred this year, our expenses are going to be $48,986.02. For an item that does not speak directly to our mission, our board is currently pursuing other options to help offset that cost in other ways. The revenue from our merchants this year is $20,270, which is up from last year of $14,760. So we're doing something right. We're bringing in more revenue, but we do have added expenses. So all in, just for the farmer's market, the waste from what we are spending is $28,716.02. That's a lot for us to swallow as an organization doing this as a service not tied to our mission directly. And when you bring in music at the market, which is kind of hand in hand with that, it's actually a larger number. Our loss is larger in that category. So we know we have to pay it. We know that we've brought in the dirt and the garbage and the door cups, and we need to take care of those. That's not the problem. It's just we weren't prepared for that. So that's what I came in front to report today. Is there any questions?
What, you say you had data on the farmer's market going back, the history of the farmer's market?
Correct, yeah, about 19 years.
19 years.
That's close to when, I think John Mercer could actually speak to that directly.
That was when I was there.
That's fantastic. He was actually the proponent to start this, and so we thank you for Farmers Market. If we were to estimate that expense throughout its lifespan, we would be almost $500,000 at loss. Now that's something that obviously gives and takes with the tides. Obviously 2020 there was not any activity. 2021 was a slow comeback year, but that's a significant amount of money to not be putting into our actual tourism component. So either we need to offset that cost by sponsorships, or offset the way that we're spending that money, or offset the actual event itself. And so that's what we're pursuing, right? But you're correct, we did it. We did our homework.
Any questions?
I'm a little confused. Christine, you said that the farmer's market is not part of your core mission. I don't understand that.
The core mission for the CVB is to promote tourism and business commerce in the Perrysburg city and vicinity, direct vicinity, immediate vicinity. So for us, it is a byproduct to have a successful event, because a large population that come to the farmer's market already live here, and we're trying to get those outside sales to come into the community, if that makes sense.
Well, I think a lot of people at farmer's market are not necessarily Perrysburg residents, but I guess I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, they're not staying overnight, let's put it that way. And since we're funded from hotel tax, that's kind of where our sweet spot is when we're looking at if it's a successful event, is it driving the traffic that needs to be in its current configuration to those hotels?
Well, if the CVB is going to become a marketing PR agency for the hotels, maybe you got to reconsider the whole setup here, because I view the CVB as fulfilling other missions in town. And you refer to you sustained a loss on the farmer's market. I think that's been a real positive thing for the community.
It's great for the community. I agree with you 100%. It is a wonderful event. I'm not saying it should go away by any stretch of the imagination. We just need to alter how we're doing business. If I'm a good steward of the money that's set in front of me from my budget, I can't stand behind a $48,000 loss on an event that doesn't directly drive heads to beds, as we jokingly say in the business. But that doesn't mean it can't change. It just needs to be evaluated. I think we've never really had a hard look at it because it's such a great event. Nobody wants to see it change, but that doesn't mean it should be, how do I say this without being, I don't want to be negative. I don't want to see it change hands to another organization that can't uphold it the way that we did, if that makes sense. If it has to leave our care, I want it to continue in the same quality that it is currently.
I agree.
Yeah. I don't want to see it go away at all. I love it. Everybody needs to buy bread on Thursday nights. So it just needs to be checked better for where the holes are in the process. And this year was the first time we've not been revenue neutral, and that's because of these current charges that are being, and we've earned them. You've seen the garbage. You know, there's a lot of people that are here, but we just didn't have a plan for that. There was no contingency for additional expenses. We didn't know what happened.
You know, Tim, and you just mentioned how it is really good for the community. You know, whether it puts heads in beds or not, it's still really good for the community, which I thought maybe we could place some value on it for the city itself to maybe help in those costs, because so it's who really are benefiting more than the hotels are the business owners down here. And so, you maybe might want to look, the chamber may want to look in.
If I can interject here real quick, because I see and looking at where it's an investment, the CVB board is an investment into trying to help continue to grow and support what the mission is. I know that there's going to be additional costs. I think that was proposed for 2023 with the police being thrown in as the expense as well, which wasn't being charged in the past, which is going to make even further loss moving forward. We've also been made aware that at some point the holiday parade, the Memorial Day parade, may be orphaned with the individual who's running that. They're not going to be able to do that forever. That I liken those events to something like this. And one of my thoughts is that we should look at as either community or being facilitated by the city to get this started is an entity that can help take those over. I know Rochford recently lost the group that was running the Halloween parade. The city has recently taken that over as well. I know that isn't necessarily something the city wants to have to take on, but if there's a way for the city to help facilitate creating an organization that would be for events that are happening within the community, with either seats on there or something else of that nature, we need to start working on having a conversation to get some of the players involved that are benefiting off it, not just from the chamber, even having the CVB have the seats. DPI is another entity that we should be working with, but talking to see what can we do to make these better and how can we make these run to where they can continue to be successful, and then we can continue moving them forward without having to wait till the last minute to say, all right, they can't do it anymore. How are we going to solve this and start preparing for that inevitability in the future?
Yeah, but I mean, if you're going to start trying to run all those events and fund them through the general fund, I'm going to have an issue with that. I think that's part of what the CVB should be doing. And if the CVB is going to focus on, what is it, heads to beds? I was on there.
Heads and beds, we joke about butts and beds, whatever you want to call it.
I mean,
Depends on where you're
the
I guess.
was last time, the hotel motel tax, the city has like a 1/3 share, is that?
Currently, the portion of the Ohio Revised Code hotel motel tax that was enacted by the city appears to be what I used to call the B tax. It's the B section of the code, whereby the city levies a tax no greater than, I believe, 3%, correct me if I'm wrong, Amber, and that 3% has to be split between the city and your CVB, who's using those monies for marketing purposes for the city and for the area. That's the current tax that's been enacted. So we are required to split that 50-50.
So I see in the budget for 23, I think you're showing 550,000 for CVB.
I will defer to the finance director.
So that is the total revenue coming in for hotel tax, and then half of that would be what would go to the CVB.
Okay. Well, 550 is the total coming in, and then half, because we got a payment out to the CVB.
We just got to check that out.
We'll do it every month.
And if the farmer's market's taking 10% of that, that's I think how much was the losses last year?
This year will be 28,716.02.
No. So that's a significant portion of that that's coming out of there. And then we're going to add potentially more with the police charges on top of that.
Is that true that starts next year?
That is Chief Jones's intent. We had a meeting here with Christine, actually in attendance, with DPI, as well as with the chamber, letting them know rolling forward our need to recover those city expenses and what the rates were based on collective bargaining agreements at the time.
Yeah, he gave me an estimate of what to expect for next year's and its current configuration of 5 hours for an event day over a 24-week period. And we've talked about adjusting that as well to maybe save some of that money. So yeah, we've been given those numbers already.
What was the numbers?
450 or 455 to 500, depending on the number of people that needed to be.
Do you have the total for that 24?
That'd be between the two organizations, including streets, it's about $1,000 a day for those two expenses.
Okay.
So about 24,000 for the season if we did 24 weeks of farmers markets again. That's fast math for a block. Any other questions? Hey, go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm the 48,000 number that you said is not exclusively fees that the city charged. It's
Correct, it is not
Higher
exclusive,
cost.
no, that is all in, correct. That is
your
all in.
salary, any staff, anything.
Signage, marketing, everything. all
Everything
in.
that it costs
Correct.
the CDBG.
Yeah, that's the true cost allocation study. So if it was just a budget line item, it'd be a very easy number, but that came with estimating how many hours per week we did work just on farmer's market. It's about 20% of my workload to manage the farmer's market every year, so by those hours. Yeah, so you are correct.
Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Go on record, that's not just you guys.
And Christine, the net you said on farmer's market cost is 28 something.
Correct. Yeah. And so then that does not also include music at the market, which goes hand in hand. Those numbers, we could talk about it another time. I don't want to waste your time on it today, but just to speak to what the numbers are right now compared to what they were previously, the revenue was neutral for farmers market. When we incurred these costs, that's where we get the loss this year.
The revenue was neutral?
We were revenue neutral. Whatever we brought in, we put back out just in promotions and in marketing and to help pay for the salary on the staff that were working. Yeah.
Just.
We don't make any money on it, and we should. That's a place to make some money as well.
How do you go from being revenue neutral to being 28,000 in hole, so to speak?
Yeah, well, we had a $11,182 bill for streets division this year. And the estimate that we thought we were going to receive from the police, but was included in that number. So if we're not receiving we haven't received the bill yet from Chief Jones for this season. So that estimate was included in that $28,000 loss. Yeah, that's where this came from. Yeah, that was a good question. I should have probably clarified that better. I apologize.
So we don't know that you're getting that bill yet for 2022?
That bill is not happening.
Okay.
Sorry, that was very.
Christine, thank you.
You're welcome.
For
Thank you, everyone.
coming and for the information. I know we really got to get moving on. Anything else on this agenda item you want to, or?
So the only thing that I still kind of, I mean,
Continue
I'm
this?
glad to see some of this information. I want to do some more on that. I still think that that's something that we may want to consider. And I know I mentioned this at the last meeting, having some sort of recourse where, it's kind of more that when you see it, that it's a benefit to the community, and that we should look at finding a way to either waive the fees or to reduce fees based on the application process for certain entities that we're seeing a big uptick of visitors, as well as something that's going to be helping the local businesses as well. So, but I still think that we may want to consider, we have to keep in mind as well that in the near future, we still have a holiday parade that maybe Orphan and Memorial Day parade, and I'm sure that there might be other events moving forward that our community still want to see happening. I don't know if we'll have someone that's going to be at that, who would take over at that time, but that's something we need to have a conversation on at some point. That may be something more on the administrative side. But I don't know if it's something we have to have a conversation on even on council, but we know that those are going to happen at some point. We need to be prepared that we either let it go or we find a way to keep those moving forward as a community.
I have one more quick question for Christine. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I'm here.
How many, I think you said you did a little research on other communities that have farmers markets.
Yes.
How many of those?
17.
And how many of those are run by CBB?
0.
Okay. All right.
That's all you needed.
Yeah.
I had to stand up that fast for that.
Thank you.
0, apologies. Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay, all right.
Just like to keep this on the agenda moving forward.
I would like to keep that, yes, I still want to discuss this more.
Yeah, I guess we'll do those thoughts, but yeah, let's keep it on the agenda.
Yeah, that way we can get through tonight's agenda, not make Jonathan run too late here, but, all right. So, yeah, we'll keep that for next month's agenda.
One more question, Bridget, on your chart, where you've got charges for police, and you've got the column is entitled project. That just means, yes, they do charge.
Yes, they do charge. Some communities will only, like Waterville, for instance, they will only, they require any event to hire project law enforcement, but it's not Waterville's law enforcement. They do not allow that to happen. They force them to hire Lucas County Sheriff's deputies and pay them a project rate.
Yeah.
What is interesting about using a project rate is that if that person who's out projecting were to get hurt during the course of that event, they could possibly have no recourse to workers' compensation because they're not working for the entity in which they're employed. So we stopped projecting a number of years ago. We are simply using an overtime rate, and they're maintaining their city employment status with us. They're in our uniform, they're under our command, and they are working for the city at that point in time so that they achieve all of the pension benefits, and they also have access to workers' compensation in the event they would get injured.
Okay, so when it's yes on project, that means they staff with police, but they use project police.
Correct, and Sylvania has a mixture of both depending on the type of event. I guess that's Chief Jones. Maumee is, they do both depending on the events.
Okay.
They'll do some projecting, and they will also force people in on overtime. Because when you see overtime, you're forcing somebody for their collective bargaining agreement to work, whether they wanted to or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, for all the information.
You're welcome, and based on the conversation, we will do some research as well.
Okay, great. Number 4 is request to declare items surplus.
Okay, there are a few. First of all, fire has 5 cardiac monitors that are no longer useful to them. They would like them declared surplus and wish to donate them.
I don't know if we're donating this.
What else would we do? Do you, are there any?
What?
You said you don't know if they're donating them?
They are donating them, I don't know who.
Oh, just
they're
who,
donating.
okay. All right, we know it's going to be a worthy cause.
It's not me.
That's a good thing.
Then there's also a few cars from utilities, a 2008 Crown Victoria, a 2010 Crown Vic, a 2009 Ford truck, and a 2004 Dodge Ram truck.
They all sound pretty old, and I'm sure they have a lot of miles on them.
Yep, and all of those will be sold on govdeals.com, and the money will then go into the fund it came out of. Although they're utilities, they were initially purchased by police. So
Have
they'll
those
go into the
vehicles
general
been
fund.
replaced by now, or there's, okay,
Yes, yeah.
those have all been replaced?
Yep, hand-me-down several times.
Is this legislation all those in one?
No, the fire monitors are one piece of legislation.
Okay.
And the 4 vehicles are a second piece of legislation, because they're coming from different departments and they're being disposed of in different ways.
Mhm.
So since we're donating one but auctioning off the others, it's 2 pieces of legislation.
Okay, so, any objections on the first one, the fire monitors? Okay, we'll move that ahead 3-0. And then, any questions or objections to the 4 vehicles? None of those.
I'm amazed some of this one's got this car, it's a 2004 car, and it's only got 113,000 miles on it.
Yes,
I mean, that
It's
was,
all city miles though.
yeah,
and those are even harder sometimes, yeah,
but
definitely harder
I
on,
don't think we'd expect people to be driving around in 2004 vehicles.
almost, yeah, going on 20 years old. All right, we can move on to number 5, is the Right Stuff software renewal.
Okay, Right Stuff is the software that we use for scheduling and payroll. Basically, it started with, I believe, police to help out with scheduling, then it went on to fire, now it's citywide. We do import that directly into our financial software. This is just the annual agreement. Since it's over $25,000 in total, we need legislation.
Okay,
Isn't it an increase from last year?
It's a very slight increase. Last year it was under, I want to say just under 25, so I don't believe
oh,
we had to bring it
I was just saying.
a year ago.
Do we have to renew this every year, or is this,
It's a 3-year.
Yeah, this is a 3-year through 2024.
so this is just one time, but that is an annual fee every year?
Yes.
Good for that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, 3-0 on that. And everyone's favorite, approval of then and now purchases?
Only your favorite.
Okay, only mine.
There's a list of
Every
them
month we
now.
still get these, I love
We're still getting them. I don't love it. $60,938 is the total for this month. Again, it's just purchases that were made before a purchase order was issued. There was money in the budget to cover it. That's why it's a then and now. We had the money then, and we still have it now
it. Okay.
when we need to make the payment.
All right. This is,
Do we need to talk to
we've
our
been
law
doing
director on any of these in and out?
I don't,
I just saw law, that's why the department was law on there for a couple, so.
Someone's asking everybody.
what did I do?
And that was utility.
There's two different
You
legal
did have
ones.
one.
What did I do?
You did get a PO for
He's
it.
asking Rich and Dory's.
Oh, that's our ongoing argument.
Yeah, the labor attorneys and the environmental license.
We're having a discussion about how to bill for outside counsel, because you can't really predict how much you're gonna use them, so we're, law and finance are working on that.
You
Okay,
can set up a blanket purchase order so you're covered
Yeah.
going forward.
okay, good.
We're working.
I have no objections.
And no objections here. Let's move that one on 3-0.
What was the total then again?
Yeah.
You say it. Okay, now the request for the 22 budget amendments.
Okay.
2022, that's,
There's two separate sheets for this. First of all, I've been trying quarterly to come back to Finance Committee and request budget adjustments instead of waiting till the end of the year and making big adjustments. The first half of the list are actually, they net out to zero. We're just moving it between groups, whether it's a service versus a supply, capital item. Again, those are just moving between groups or categories. When you get to the middle, HR, there's an additional request, and also fire is an additional request. Those are the only two that will affect the general fund. After that is a grant fund, refuse, utilities, and then the bottom two are hotel tax and cemetery, which are just flow-throughs that really doesn't affect our bottom line. Those are monies that we get from outside agencies that we then in turn pay to either the CPB or the cemetery, obviously, from the county auditor. We receive it and then it goes to the cemetery. So if there's any questions on those, I can expand farther on any.
On the breakdown, I keep finding the ordinance, but on the breakdown.
It's in, should put it in front in your packet,
Oh,
Yep.
okay, instead of
that's this one.
behind.
I don't have that. All I have is a 2022
Go ahead,
budget.
that's it.
Okay, thanks. So what was the HR one again? I apologize.
That's okay, the HR one was for something that was not budgeted. We were not expecting the fire chief to leave, and that was for an assessment center.
I'm assuming the same thing is for the fire increase?
Fire actually, half of that is kind of good news. I don't know, maybe not. Ambulance billing charges are up.
Gotcha.
So there will be revenue increase to offset some of that as well. But that's for the billing service that we pay.
So good to you too?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, also a budget adjustment is next in your packet. It's the fund 14 pages.
No, yeah, that's fine.
We'll try to briefly explain this. We recently got new software. It actually went live last Monday. So we had a similar project where we redid the whole chart of accounts for the city. So basically, this report is showing the column that says 2022 budget CMI, that's the old system. The column right next to that, VIP, is the new system. And we're not asking for additional appropriations, we're just moving money between the groups, the categories. For example, we set up a new group, which is memberships, dues, registrations, training, travel, so that can be accounted for separately. And then just to appropriately use the more correct accounts going forward is how I would say it. Services versus supplies. So again, there's a difference column all the way on the right, but then you can see they net out to zero. So we're showing with all of the categories for each department where we're moving it to and from, and then the net difference being zero.
Is this a one-time thing?
This is a one-time thing since we got the new software. So then you will also see these new account numbers on the budget. They're in our system now going forward. Yeah, but a one-time change, if you will. kind of a cleanup.
Let me understand, to take council's budget. The CMI had 36,000 for supplies and materials. VIP has 2,000. Now, the balance of 34 goes into some other financing sources? What's that mean?
Correct. Kayla and I found, as we went through, there were a lot of inconsistencies with account labels. So even though an account technically should have fell as a other financing source, which I can tell you that is a community support item that is $20,000 that's in that 34, that was expended previously as a material and supply. So we're that's just one example of how we're moving things to how it's always been done to actually what it should be. So we're changing labels so they're consistent between departments and also training managers and anyone that makes purchases of where things go.
Okay.
And it's really good.
And it's more important, obviously, that you guys all understand this than we do.
Yes.
And what's the label other financing sources confuses me, because that doesn't sound like an expense, it sounds like a revenue.
True, I can see your point, but that's basically, it can be transfers, it can be refunds. It's not specifically the service that we're receiving. It's not specifically material we're buying or personnel or training. It's something that we're giving to the outside or we're transferring to another fund. I could have used other, but I don't like putting a lot in other.
Like what I say, it needs to make sense to you guys. I mean, we can ask questions where we
Yes,
see something
please
that doesn't
do.
make sense to
Yep.
us, but, okay.
I can give you a cleanup example. So I share Westlaw with the prosecutor's office and the court, and we were paying for Westlaw each of us was paying for Westlaw out of a different numbered account. And so this last time it came through, we cleaned that up and it's now all coming out of the same matching numbers because it didn't, that's just how it had always been done.
It just
And
evolved.
It's evolved that way. So that's one example of how this is cleaning that up, that each of us has the same last 5 digits
I got you.
that are paying the Westlaw bill.
Makes sense. And then you're saying like the 20,000 that goes to the Heights was coming out of supplies and materials? Okay.
Another example you'll see too is in fringe benefits, uniforms and food reimbursements were in there, and they're more of a supply as well, so we moved those out of fringes into supplies.
Okay.
It was a big project.
Yeah, I guess it was. Boy,
We spent months on this,
boy.
but we've educated the departments, and it is going well.
Mhm.
Will both of these be under one piece of legislation?
That's how it's drafted now. That may change by Tuesday. So if you can just move approval of both sets of budgets forward to City Council, I may turn these into 2 different pieces of legislation for Tuesday.
By emergency or not?
That's a neighbor question.
I believe that appropriations are automatically emergencies.
I want to make sure I ask this at the committee level from now on. And just backing up, that those surplus items, were they emergencies?
Non-emergency.
They're non? Okay, but then and now they are emergencies?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right, yes, I had to say it. Okay, and then these may or may not be, but they may or may not be 2 pieces of legislation, but
It will
we're,
be emergencies. It may be that I decide to separate the budget changing stuff, because that's really different than the account into 2 pieces of legislation.
and we're all good with moving those forward? Okay. So it's either 3-0 or 6-0, it depends if she has 1 or 2. Number 10 is a discussion of the 2023 budget. I know we just pretty much all got our hard copies today. Is there any specific thing you want to talk about that, or do we still have November if you want to get in real deep with that?
Maybe we'll start looking over, but
Yeah.
Bridget, maybe you can mention what you were telling me before the meeting.
Yes, absolutely. Amber and I were having a conversation today, and we know that the format is somewhat similar, somewhat different account numbers, different fund numbers. So what we're doing right now is Amber and Kayla are painstakingly going back through what the departments turn into them for detailed budget sheets that has it more granular, broken out. They're just going back through and making sure that that bottom number matches the bottom number for each of their budgets there, and we'll ship that out to you folks in the very, very, very near future, as well as the list of budget requests that came in that we removed from the budget that's before you in order to balance the budget, so we'll give you that list as well.
And
They
we're
have
gonna,
that in front of them.
Oh, great, thank you, Amber.
okay, we're gonna wanna vote on this in the first meeting in December, so that just gives us, on November, you wanna chew on it a while and then talk
Yeah,
about in November on if there's any.
Hopefully the chairman will have a shorter agenda.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping for, that's why I'm trying to kind of push this.
And please email Amber, Kayla, and myself
Yes.
as questions come up. We're more than happy to answer them as we go along.
Okay.
On the capital improvements plan, all of them I see that I have an interest in will go to committees, except where is municipal police campus renovations gonna go?
That could go to any committee you wish, or multiple committees. It could remain in finance. It could be service, since it is, I think as a standalone, I probably would put it under service because it's a building that we're looking at, but obviously finance kind of oversees everything. And they could go to multiple committees. If you'd like to go to safety as well, it doesn't matter to the administration.
I don't know. Jonathan, you're the president, where do you want to send it?
For the actual, I know you're talking about, I thought you meant what account it was, since we're looking at the budget.
No, this is capital improvements, 1.2 million.
Yeah, I think that would be a service project personally.
I mean, it all comes back here eventually.
It all comes back to council too, so.
All council, yeah.
But I think service is still the right place for that. I mean, it would make sense to possibly come to finance. Maybe it's something we just jointly talk to both committees.
Yeah, okay.
And it's not the first time we've kicked it around a couple different committees for
Yeah,
things.
for sure.
Okay.
We will take that under advisement.
Any other budget questions?
And we will
No.
keep it on the next month's.
Yes, absolutely, on that too, on the next, we're already starting that, getting that list done. Request to add the urban forester into the pay bands.
Personnel approved a new position of urban forester, and we have to give finance a way to pay them if this individual is hired. And so we need to amend the code to list an urban forester in pay bandy, and that's all this is doing.
And that's 50 to 100, isn't it?
Well, it's a range.
It's a range, yes.
It's a range of pay bandy. And this isn't hiring that person, this isn't doing anything other than putting that position, so if and when that person is actually hired, finance can pay them, and Amber doesn't come and tell me that she can't pay them.
Is that the correct band for? I'm assuming that there was research done to say that
Yes,
this
it was
is.
determined that pay band D was the appropriate pay range for this position.
And I think we pretty well said that, personnel.
Yes, I heard you say somewhere in the middle, it's gonna be somewhere in the, probably in the
Yeah,
middle.
yeah.
All
I
right,
have no issues.
no issues, we'll move that ahead as well. And that takes us to Amber's,
Our usual stuff.
yes, fine.
Did we do this?
It's been taken off.
Oh.
I think there was an email telling us. that.
We need to talk about that in November.
Okay.
Amber, I was thinking it would look different this month.
Not yet,
Not yet,
because we
okay.
just started last week, so
All right,
all of our September information is still in the old
so I
system.
still have to
This
ask
is-
questions.
This is the last one you're gonna see that looks like this.
All right.
New format coming.
We're growing accustomed.
Right?
Yeah. Do you guys have questions on the expenses over 5,000?
Do you have questions?
I didn't see that.
No, that's fine.
On this list, you're
I'm
good
cool.
with this list?
Yeah, I didn't see anything.
No, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary this month. Okay. All right.
Okay, the next item, the health insurance fund, still steadily increasing a little bit. We're at 1.1 million. Hope to have renewals out soon for employee health. Nothing crazy there.
See the number, yeah, that's
Yep,
a
claims
great
were
balance to have.
pretty close
I
to.
missed seeing the graphs this month, but
Yeah.
that was always fun to look at, but
I'll make it better next month. We can use the new software, maybe even, you know.
Oh, all
right, that's
color.
great.
Yeah.
Oh, man,
Yeah.
we'll come back then.
thank you, Amber.
I have one more thing. Quarterly, our investment policy does say that quarterly I need to update you on investments. So I have one sheet in front of you. It lists the banks, the balances, and the year-to-date interest received is $396,000. We have been working another project in our office, cash flow forecasting, and taking advantage as the rates do increase. Not everyone likes that, but for our investments, that's been helping.
Mhm. Yes,
And that's all I have.
okay. We're on the tax commission's report. Steve,
Very good.
thanks for sitting through all this.
Yeah, last but not least.
I probably should have moved you to the top.
For the sake of time, I'll be brief.
right.
Tax collections are up, they've been healthy. Any questions?
You stuck around just for that, come on.
Very good. Does anybody need a copy of the report?
I have one, thank you.
So, obviously, for the month of September, you'll see we collected 2.1 million in income tax, and that puts us 11% up. So again, we're up, healthy collections for the month. And if you look at your year-to-date figure, you'll see we just eclipsed 21 million for the first 9 months, the first 3 quarters of the year, and that puts us a little over 20% up compared to that same time period last year. So we got very, very strong, very healthy tax collections for 2022.
And Steve, what's the net if you back out that refund?
If we,
Can't seem to get decided by the state, or?
correct, yeah, we have that one single taxpayer payment of 1.2 million that came through the state, seemed a little out of the ordinary. If that is skewing the numbers for us somewhat, if we back that out, that puts us at about 13.5% up year to date.
Let's give them a deadline before they ask us back, right?
Or if we forfeit
Because
it.
we're tired of asking about it, so they're
You
gonna have to
send a letter
forfeit
to the state and say, the law director's gonna ask you to forfeit this.
Yeah, that's right.
There you
So, any issues yet with the work at home, or how's that still progressing?
Actually, that has not impacted us in a negative way at this point. We are seeing an increase in the refunds. If you see that year-to-date figure, as we kind of anticipated last year when we talked about this, there's a number of refunds that we've been issuing. Our refunds are more than double where we were at, or almost double where we were at this point last year. However, on the withholding side, we're about 6% off for the first 9 months of the year. So even though we have a number of accounts that maybe are reporting less withholdings this year because of that work at home, we do have a number of new accounts for people who are residents who are working from home. And so the net effect has been an increase so far. So again, it's been positive.
That's because Perrysburg is called the best hometown in Ohio, right? So people love working from home.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Any other business to come before the committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then we'll adjourn.
Thank you.